Welcome to Compact Mysteries from CompactHistories.com, the show where we try to unravel a different bite-sized mystery each week, from baffling disappearances and strange objects to unexplained events and mysterious places. This is episode 87, The Mystery of Bigfoot. Long before the name Bigfoot appeared in newspapers, communities across Western North America told stories about unusual beings associated with forests, mountains, and remote places. These traditions differed greatly between First Nations, with some describing powerful human-like beings, while others concerned spiritual figures, dangerous giants, or communities of wild people. Their meaning depended upon the beliefs, history, and landscape of the particular indigenous culture from which they came. The word Sasquatch has a more specific origin. It entered wider English usage through J.W. Burns, a schoolteacher and government agent who worked with First Nations communities in British Columbia. In articles published from 1929 onwards, Burns used Sasquatch as an English rendering of a word from the Halkomelem language. The Setziles people use the name Saskets for a being of cultural and spiritual significance. The modern image of a solitary ape wandering through the forest is therefore not an exact representation of the original tradition. It was created partly by outsiders, combining several distinct indigenous accounts. European settlers also reported encounters with supposed wild people. During the 19th and early 20th centuries, newspapers in the United States and Canada carried stories about hairy men, giant footprints, and creatures glimpsed in isolated valleys. Some witnesses described human fugitives or people living outside society, while others claimed they had seen something more animal-like. The reliability of these reports varied considerably. Many appeared only once, lacked named witnesses, or were copied between newspapers without further investigation. Stories of wild creatures also belonged to the culture of logging camps and frontier settlements. Workers entertained one another with tales of impossible animals, strange noises, and practical jokes played upon inexperienced colleagues. Carved footprints were a familiar form of deception. Such stories helped turn dangerous and unfamiliar landscapes into places filled with recognizable characters, even if those characters were imaginary. These different traditions gradually became mixed together. Indigenous cultural figures, newspaper wild men, lumber camp jokes, and speculation about unknown apes were increasingly presented as parts of one continuous mystery. Yet there was still no standard name or agreed description. One report might concern a giant, another a hairy human, and another an ape-like animal. That changed in Northern California during 1958, when a road worker carried an enormous plaster footprint into a newspaper office. Within days, a local story acquired a memorable name and an international audience. In August 1958, bulldozer operator Jerry Crew was working on a timber access road near Bluff Creek in Northern California. The area lay within the densely forested mountains surrounding the Klamath River, far from the state's major cities. Crew discovered several large human-like footprints pressed into freshly disturbed earth near his machine. Other workers claimed similar tracks had appeared at nearby work sites, sometimes accompanied by reports of missing equipment or heavy objects being moved. The tracks were approximately 16 inches long and 7 inches wide. Crew initially suspected that another worker was playing a joke, but further prints appeared during September. He eventually made a plaster cast after receiving advice from taxidermist and amateur investigator Bob Titmus. Crew believed the depth of the impressions suggested that their maker was extremely heavy. That reasoning was not conclusive, however, because the depth of a track also depends upon the condition of the ground and the way weight is applied. News reached Andrew Genzoli, a columnist at the Humboldt Times in Eureka. Genzoli was initially doubtful, but recognized that the story would interest readers. On the 6th of October, the newspaper published a front-page photograph of Crew holding the enormous cast. The accompanying report asked whether the prints were a human hoax or the marks of a harmless wild man. The worker's nickname for the unidentified track maker, originally written as Bigfoot, was condensed into the single word Bigfoot. The report was carried by news agencies and quickly appeared far beyond Humboldt County. Television programs joined the discussion, while the newspaper received thousands of letters. Bigfoot differed from the Himalayan Yeti because it supposedly inhabited an accessible part of the United States. Anyone with camping equipment, a camera, and sufficient determination could imagine joining the search. Bluff Creek became the center of the developing mystery, and Willow Creek later adopted Bigfoot as a local symbol and tourist attraction. Investigators began gathering older sightings and presenting them as evidence that the Bluff Creek tracks were not an isolated event. John Green, Renee Dahinden, and other researchers interviewed witnesses, collected footprint casts, and searched remote areas of the Pacific Northwest. Their work helped establish the description that remains familiar today: a tall, powerfully built biped covered in dark hair, possessing a human-like face and leaving oversized tracks. The photographs of Jerry Crew created public interest, but photographs of footprints could not establish what had made them. Searchers wanted an image of the creature itself. 9 years later, 2 horsemen entered the Bluff Creek region carrying a film camera and returned with the footage that would define Bigfoot for generations. Roger Patterson was a rodeo rider and enthusiastic Bigfoot investigator from Yakima, Washington. By 1967, he had interviewed witnesses, visited reported track sites, and self-published a book about unidentified hairy creatures. He also planned to make a documentary-style film about the subject. In October, Patterson traveled to the Bluff Creek area with his friend Bob Gimlin, an experienced horseman who remained more cautious about the creature's existence. On October 20th, the men were riding beside the creek when, according to their account, their horses reacted to a large figure standing nearby. Patterson dismounted, retrieved a rented 16mm camera, and began filming while running across the uneven ground. The resulting footage was shaky at first, but briefly showed a dark, hair-covered figure walking away. At one point, it turned its upper body and looked towards the camera before continuing into the trees. The figure appeared to possess prominent breasts, leading many viewers to conclude that it was female. It later became known as Patty, after Patterson. Gimlin remained behind with a rifle, while Patterson followed the tracks, but the pair did not see the figure again. They poured plaster into some of the footprints before leaving the area. The exposed film was subsequently developed and shown to researchers, journalists, and members of the public. Supporters have argued that the figure's proportions, apparent muscles, and method of walking could not easily have been reproduced using a costume available in 1967. Some have identified movements that they consider different from an ordinary human stride. Skeptics respond that the figure remains within the range of human proportions and that a person wearing a padded suit could reproduce its general movements. Attempts to calculate its height have produced conflicting results because the original distance, camera angle, and dimensions of objects within the scene are uncertain. Another difficulty is the camera speed. Patterson did not record its setting, and different playback speeds affect how natural or unnatural the walk appears. Generations of copying also reduce the clarity of many widely circulated versions. Enlargements have supposedly revealed muscles, fingers, facial details, and even costume fastenings, but researchers often disagree about what the blurred shapes show. Patterson maintained that the encounter was genuine until his death in 1972, while Gimlin has consistently denied knowingly participating in a hoax. Nevertheless, the film provides an image rather than an identifiable specimen. It transformed the public conception of Bigfoot, but it could not settle the creature's existence. Investigators therefore continued searching for evidence that could be measured, tested, and independently confirmed. Thousands of people have reported seeing Bigfoot or finding signs attributed to it. Typical accounts describe a tall, broad-shouldered figure walking on 2 legs, often crossing a road or disappearing into woodland. Other reports mention powerful odors, whistles, howls, tree knocks, and stones apparently thrown from concealed positions. Witness testimony can be sincere and detailed, but it cannot usually be tested after an encounter has ended. Footprints remain the most frequently presented physical evidence. Some occur as isolated impressions, while others form trackways extending across mud, snow, or soft ground. Anthropologist Grover Krantz and anatomy specialist Jeff Meldrum argued that certain casts contained features difficult for casual hoaxers to reproduce. These included variations in pressure, apparent skin ridges, and a flexible middle section of the foot. Other specialists have questioned these interpretations, noting that soil movement, casting defects, and deliberately carved surfaces can create misleading details. Hair samples appear more promising because modern laboratories can identify their species. In 1976, Bigfoot researcher Peter Byrne contacted the FBI after hearing claims that the organization had previously examined unidentified hairs. The FBI agreed to inspect hairs supplied by Byrne, although it did not open a criminal investigation into Bigfoot. Microscopic analysis found that the hairs belonged to the deer family. The episode was later exaggerated into claims that the FBI possessed secret evidence of an unknown creature. A broader genetic investigation was published in the Proceedings of the Royal Society B in 2014. Researchers collected alleged Bigfoot, Yeti, and other anomalous primate hairs from museums and private collections. 30 samples yielded mitochondrial DNA results, but none provided evidence of an unidentified North American ape. They were traced to known mammalian lineages, including bears, horses, cattle, wolves, dogs, and other familiar animals. The study demonstrated that even unusual-looking hair cannot be reliably identified by appearance alone. Recordings of supposed calls and woodknocks face similar problems. Forests contain bears, deer, coyotes, owls, and humans, all capable of producing unexpected sounds. Without an observed source, a recording cannot establish which animal made it. Photographs and videos have become more numerous, but most remain distant, obscured, or too unclear for identification. No accepted Bigfoot body, bone, tooth, tissue sample, or uncontaminated genetic sequence has entered a recognized scientific collection. This absence does not prove that every witness was mistaken, but it prevents the reports from being linked to a verified species. To understand why the evidence repeatedly stops short, attention must turn to hoaxes and ordinary animals. The Bluff Creek story acquired a damaging complication in 2002. After the death of construction worker Ray Wallace, members of his family displayed large wooden feet and claimed he had used them to create the tracks discovered in 1958. Wallace was known for practical jokes and had spent years circulating photographs and stories about Bigfoot. His family's disclosure did not explain every footprint reported elsewhere, but it showed that evidence associated with the birth of the modern legend could have been manufactured. The Patterson-Gimlin film has attracted its own alleged confessions. Bob Hieronymus, an acquaintance of Patterson, claimed that he had played the creature while wearing a costume. Costume maker Philip Morris later said he had sold Patterson a gorilla suit that could have been modified for the filming. Patterson was not alive to answer these claims. Gimlin rejected the hoax explanation, and no authenticated original costume was produced. Consequently, the account strengthened suspicion without supplying universally accepted proof of fabrication. The controversy intensified in 2026 when the documentary Capturing Bigfoot presented footage said to date from 1966. It reportedly showed a costumed figure in what the filmmakers interpreted as a rehearsal for the later Bluff Creek sequence. The documentary also included testimony from Patterson's son supporting the belief that his father staged the famous film. Bigfoot advocates disputed the interpretation and provenance of the material. The film therefore remains culturally powerful, although its value as scientific evidence has become still more contested. Many sightings need not involve deliberate deception. Black bears can stand and walk briefly on their hind legs, particularly when investigating a smell or surveying their surroundings. Seen through vegetation, at dusk, or from a moving vehicle, a bear's proportions can appear surprisingly human-like. A 2024 study covering the United States and Canada found that reported Bigfoot sightings increased with estimated black bear populations, even after accounting for human population and forest area. On average, every additional 1,000 bears was associated with a 4% increase in reported sightings. People can also misjudge distance and size when familiar reference points are absent. Expectation influences perception, while memory may become more definite as a witness repeatedly recounts an ambiguous experience. None of this means that every witness is dishonest. A person can accurately report what they believe they saw while being mistaken about its identity. Hoaxes explain some evidence, and misidentifications plausibly explain much more. The remaining question is whether a hidden biological population could account for the reports that resist either explanation. For Bigfoot to be a living animal rather than an isolated curiosity, North America would need to support a breeding population. Large primates require dependable sources of food and water, occupy substantial ranges, and leave biological material wherever they travel. Even a secretive species would shed hair, deposit waste, suffer injuries, and eventually die. Its remains might be scattered or consumed, but over many generations at least some bones or teeth should survive. The fossil record presents another difficulty. Giant apes did exist. Gigantopithecus lived in Asia before becoming extinct, but it is known mainly from teeth and jaw fragments found in China and neighboring regions. No fossil evidence shows that it reached North America, nor has the continent produced remains of any other non-human ape that could provide a clear ancestor for Bigfoot. Proposals that surviving Asian apes crossed the Bering Land Bridge remain speculation unsupported by fossils. Remote forests certainly contain places that humans visit infrequently, and science continues to identify new species. However, newly recognized large mammals generally become known through bodies, bones, photographs, or genetic samples. The saola, discovered scientifically in Vietnam in 1992, was identified from horns and skulls held by villagers. The giant squid remained unseen alive for centuries, but scientists possessed carcasses and anatomical evidence. Bigfoot presents the opposite pattern, an enormous number of reported encounters without a confirmed physical specimen. Modern technology has increased this problem. Trail cameras, smartphones, drones, and environmental DNA surveys now record wildlife across North America. These systems are imperfect and do not cover every forest, but they routinely detect bears, cougars, wolves, and other elusive animals. Bigfoot images have not improved in proportion to the number of cameras available. Clear footage usually reveals a person, bear, or deliberate costume, while unidentified figures remain frustratingly indistinct. Scientifically, Bigfoot is therefore unverified. That judgment could change if researchers obtained a properly documented body part, a repeatable genetic result, or clear evidence examined by independent specialists. Science does not require disbelief in advance, but it does require evidence strong enough to distinguish a new species from familiar animals, errors, and deception. Culturally, the mystery is very much alive. Bigfoot has become a symbol of wilderness, appearing in festivals, museums, advertisements, films, and roadside attractions. For some people, it represents the hope that parts of the natural world remain beyond human control. Its modern form combines indigenous traditions, settler folklore, journalism, disputed evidence, and popular entertainment, although those elements should not be confused with one another. The evidence currently supports Bigfoot as an enduring legend rather than a discovered animal. Its persistence reveals something genuine, even if the creature itself remains unproven. People still want the forest to contain one last enormous secret. That brings us to the end of this episode of Compact Mysteries, part of the Compact Histories Network. If you enjoyed it, please follow or subscribe wherever you're listening so you don't miss any future episodes, and consider leaving a rating or review, as it really helps new listeners find the show. You can find more episodes at compactmysteries.com, where you can also explore our other podcasts covering biographies, history, disasters, warfare, and true crime. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Pinterest. Finally, please consider supporting the show directly by buying us a coffee. Head on over to compacthistories.com/mysteriescoffee to see how. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.